Britain is at risk of being overtaken by offence culture. I work on equality at the Football Association. It's very important to me. But I find myself becoming more and more aware of how I say things, more anxious about causing offence. For years now, I've had an internal conversation about whether to hold the door open for women. Is it sexist? Well, to all of those of you who think yes, isn't that wrong, that I and other men need to worry about these things? That's also unfair. The Paralympics has brought this into clear focus. The sort of conversation in this clip about taking the plane to Rio is a breath of fresh air.
On the way out, I couldn't be bothered, like, waiting for all the wheelchairs again. I was booming. I've never pushed past so many blind people in my life. And the great thing is, I didn't even know it was me, so...
Bad for you. I was able-bodied. I genuinely, at one point, considered putting my shoes on my knees to get to the front.
Brilliant. But all too rare. Would most people honestly dare to have that conversation out loud? We say that we want to live in a society that doesn't see difference of gender, race or ability, but difference is something to be celebrated, not to be scared of.
So, Graeme, what are you scared of? I don't understand. I mean, you know, I don't ever think about some of the things you're saying. If I want to open the door for a woman, I'll open the door for a woman. I don't think we should get overly paranoid about this whole political correctness. I think, you know, we're individuals, we have opinions. Of course, we have to know there is a line that we don't cross. But I think as a society, to be overly policed and overly regulated, I think kills the whole spirit, you know, of society and community.
And that's my point, and I feel that...
I think we're just being wet.
I won't take offence. but I feel lots of situations, and over recent years, I found myself second-guessing what I'm saying, the language that I use, and of course, you know, there are obvious lines that you do not cross, and that I would take offence at like anybody else. But I feel that there's a culture that's creeping in which people take offence for the point of taking offence. They don't tolerate anything. They look, on occasions, to be offended.
I just think you're mixing with the wrong people, Graeme. I think
I need to change my...
I think so. I mean, if you're really saying to me that you're now at a point where you're going to have to think twice before you open a door for a woman, I think that's just gone too far.
No, it's not... I will always do that. I mean, I'm strong enough and...
You didn't do it for me, Annie. What's he talking about?
That's because the way you looked at me, though. But I will always stick by my guns. Of course I'll do that. But I feel that every time I do it, at some point, somebody's going to say to me, a woman will say to me, I can hold the door open myself, thanks.
And they do say that, by the way.
And they do, absolutely they do.
I completely agree with you. Couldn't agree with you more if I tried. I see girls, if a guy, I'm chivalrous, I like chivalry, and if a guy gives up the seat for me, I really like that, and I thank him and I sit down. I've heard women say to men, if a guy said, oh, do you want my seat? No, I can stand, thank you. And they do, but... So I agree with you, but I think it's such a big issue, like political correctness. It's one of the biggest examples that comes to my mind is, I don't know if you remember, a few months ago, Greater Manchester Police, I think it was, they did this terror practice in the Trafford Centre, or wherever it was. And they did this role play of a terror attack, and they started it off by shouting, their actors shouted Allah Akbar, and then they did all of the stuff. And people complained and said, how dare you use the phrase Allah Akbar, you're creating this kind of hatred towards Muslims, you're blaming Muslims for this terrorism. And the police came out and apologised because they felt so bad that they had offended this segment of the community. They took it all back and said, sorry. I was furious when I saw that, because I thought, you're being politically correct, because the sad reality is that actually, if there's going to be a terror attack, they're highly likely to shout those words before it, and that is going to be point one where you notice that something's not quite right. So they were right to do that, but they felt pressured into apologising. And I think this is going so far that it leads to the rise of people like Donald Trump, because I think people get told if you don't agree or if you cause offence, you've got to shut up because you're being wrong. You feel so suppressed, and then someone then comes along, whether it's a UKIP or a Donald Trump or someone like that, they start talking in your language, they start making you feel like, oh, okay, I can think that and I can say that. And it creates this rise of, like, people calling it far right, whatever you want to call it. It's just creating this rise in perhaps the wrong sort of opinions. And I think it stems from political correctness and oppression.
I deal with words every day.
Rant over.
Yeah.
That's what and certainly on the radio show I do on LBC, certainly you never have to be as careful as you have to be now. It is extraordinary. However, although I don't deliberately set out to cause offence, you still have to have robust opinions.
Yep.
I think you're coming from two stances. I think if you want to open the door, if you want to stand up on the tube or the train or the bus, you go ahead and do it. What I'm more worried about is what you're getting to. Two aspects that worry me. The social media storm that's actually landed broadcasters that you and I know well in really hot water for comments they might have made about tennis players, football players, golfers. I mean, the legendary Peter Alice, God bless him, I think he's in his 80s. A guy wins it and he says, well, even as he puts the winning putt, I'm sure his wife's getting ready to buy a new kitchen. He had to apologise. That's not offensive. It's how these people...
Funny.
It's funny. It's funny. It's funny. It might be a little old-fashioned. It might be a little old-fashioned. But it's funny. So so that obviously doesn't matter. Then you've got something like the intriguing Paul Gascoigne case, which was in court this week. Where he had a black bodyguard, and he used a line which, I don't want to be rude, but probably in dressing rooms when you were doing it, he said to the black guy, can you smile so I can see where you are? Because he was in it. Now, things like that aren't funny. Yeah. So we have this delicate line where you want to make a gag about a woman buying a kitchen, which isn't sexist or offensive, but you don't want black guys saying, oh, can you smile because I can't see where... So that's the line you have to tread. And just to finish my rant, because it seems to be the day of the rant, again this week, there was, I think it was an ad in a newspaper for a golly toy down at Enid Blyton, that's right, which used to be called something else. I'm deliberately saying golly toy. The viewers know what I'm saying. I'm causing no offence, so that's why I choose to call it golly toy. And it's banned because the advertising watch... Now, that is ridiculous. We're now coming to where we have so many monitoring bodies. You can't do this. And broadcast. You can't say this. You can't say that. That is what worries me more than standing up.
That, in a sense, is my point.
Well, I helped you out. I knew I had to.
Is the fact that, you know, of course we've got to protect everybody in terms of equality and making sure that people aren't offended.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we have to allow people to be themselves within certain parameters and make mistakes so that we can educate people away from ignorance.
But don't you think that clip that you showed from, is it called The Last Leg?
Last Leg, yeah.
Don't you think blind people would probably be laughing the loudest?
Well, and my own experience with people, friends of mine that have got disabilities, is they don't want people treading on eggshells around them because they're in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
They want to be...
I think a lot of people actually respect people who have a strong opinion. You know, when I hear somebody who says something, I actually look at that and say, you know what, you said what everybody else is thinking. So whilst I agree with you, but actually, I don't think we should all overly follow this paranoia, because I just think we will become so dull.
And an area of sensitivity is obviously is comedy, as we've seen, and somebody who isn't averse to controversy, Ricky Gervais, had this to say about it.
It's such a knee-jerk reaction to be offended, and sometimes, particularly with jokes, people mistake the target of the joke with the subject of a joke, and they're not necessarily the same. It's such a knee-jerk reaction to a taboo subject. You know, I get it with David Brent. People say, oh, that lyric in that song's a bit off, that's a bit dodgy. I go, well, yeah, it is. It's a fictional character. He's a bit dodgy. He says the wrong thing sometimes.
Rachel, what does...
Well, I think that public life is really diminished if we're all incredibly politically correct and we don't speak our minds. And also I worry about my children who are in their 20s. I mean, how are my sons going to be able to, quite honestly, pick up girls if the girls are going to react like, you know, saying, how do they do it now? You know, how do you tell a girl you find her attractive if you can't say, I like your dress? By the way, though, I was on the tube the other day, and a man...
That's
wait.
That's a headline in itself.
Right,
what happened to the driver, Nimby? Was he late?
What happened to the driver? Ha, ha, ha. And anyway, this man gave me his seat, and I was really worried, because I thought either he thinks I'm pregnant or I'm that old. She said to me, so I think men are on a losing wicket most of the time, because they want to do the right thing. But the younger generation of women, and I have a 22-year-old daughter who calls men out the entire time when they you know, use a bit of old-fashioned gallantry. And I just think we've all got to relax and vive la différence. You know, that's what the French say, so I'm with you.
Just to tell you, you don't have to tip the driver at the end. When you got off. I know you think that's what we all do.
I haven't got my people's pass yet, by the way, whatever it's called.
Freedom pass.
Freedom pass.
Maybe we all just need to toughen up, because I get loads of stick, by the way, about my accent, and I could choose to be offended on a daily, if not hourly basis sometimes, and I just laugh it off. I don't care.
You want it off?
Laugh it off. I've got a bit of a dodgy accent, I don't care.
Just checking.